Something happened recently that the world's most powerful institutions are not ready for you to fully understand. Deep space automated surveillance clusters operating out of the Royal Observatory in Edinburgh made a confirmation that has been sending quiet shockwaves through classified research networks ever since. An interstellar object known as 3I Atlas has officially entered its final operational phase directly above our planetary plane. Not beside it, not near it, but directly above it. The official story being assembled by institutional channels is simple. They want you to believe that what we are witnessing is an uncommon planetary gravity assist maneuver, a cold, inert chunk of space rock swinging past our sun and riding its gravitational field on a one-way journey. It sounds reasonable, scientific, and comforting, which is precisely why it works so well as a cover narrative. When you strip away the prepared statements and look directly at the raw telemetry data, what emerges is something that no standard model of cometary behavior can account for. The 3I Atlas tracking matrix tells a fundamentally different story. This object is currently sitting at a distance of 270 million kilometers from Earth, while maintaining an unwavering acceleration velocity of 58 kilometers per second. In the strict mathematical language of orbital mechanics, those numbers are extraordinary. That velocity, sustained along a confirmed open hyperbolic trajectory, means this entity is completely unbound by the gravitational field of our sun. It is not orbiting, it is not slowing down, and it is passing through our system one single time on a path that was calculated and committed to millions of years ago, somewhere deep within an unmapped region of our galaxy. That alone would be enough to warrant serious scientific discussion, but the question that has paralyzed hidden defensive monitoring stations is not where this object came from. The question is behavioral. Why did this supposedly inert mass of interstellar rock wait until the precise microsecond of its closest approach to our planet before activating secondary transmission systems? A dead rock does not have a schedule, nor does it wait. Yet, the data shows a timed activation sequence that aligns with our planet's position with a precision that natural physics simply cannot produce on its own. To understand the full weight of what that means, you have to look closely at the debris trail this object is leaving behind. In any standard cometary scenario, the tail of a visitor passing through our inner solar system is a chaotic, disorganized cloud of sublimating ice and scattered dust, pushed outward by solar radiation. There is nothing structured or intentional about it. It is the cosmic equivalent of exhaust, entirely dependent on the object's surface chemistry reacting to heat. What the strategic sensor arrays tracking 3I Atlas have recorded is nothing like that. Instead of a chaotic dust cloud, automated systems have identified a series of tightly concentrated geometric filaments emanating from the surface. These filaments are holding a fixed structural alignment specifically oriented relative to Earth's primary communication infrastructure. That is not a coincidence, nor a quirk of solar wind. That is geometry with intent, marking the beginning of a discovery that the scientific establishment has worked aggressively to keep outside of public view. When the research team stripped atmospheric noise away from the raw light curve data captured at the peak flyby window, the numbers refused to fit any existing natural model. The object is releasing material in synchronized rhythmic pulses with a metronomic precision margin of less than 3 milliseconds per cycle. No natural process produces that kind of regularity. Ice does not sublimate on a timer, and rock does not fragment to a beat. The physical degradation of a comet under solar heat is inherently chaotic, driven by surface irregularities, rotation rates, and chemical inconsistencies that make precise rhythmic pulses an absolute impossibility under standard planetary science. The only intellectually honest explanation for what the sensors recorded is that something internal to this object is generating those pulses deliberately. There is a mechanical blueprint operating inside this entity, and it has been running long enough to cross the interstellar void and arrive here on schedule. Understanding what that internal system actually is requires stepping entirely outside the comfortable vocabulary of traditional space science. When engineers design a mechanical system intended to survive millions of years inside the destructive cold vacuum between star systems, they build it with a passive thermal regulation protocol. This dormancy layer keeps all active systems completely offline until a specific environmental threshold is detected. The 3I Atlas tracking matrix suggests that this object's outer shell functioned as exactly that kind of specialized protective barrier. Constructed from a combination of complex organic polymers and dense silicate compounds, these materials were engineered to absorb decades of cosmic radiation while keeping everything underneath perfectly insulated. As 3I Atlas plunged deep into our inner solar system and the thermal intensity of our sun began hammering its surface, that outer layer executed its purpose flawlessly. The thermal runaway sequence that began stripping the exterior was not structural damage. It was a deliberate countdown designed to burn away the protective casing at a precise rate. This exposed an interior reflective titanium silicate core at the exact moment the object crossed Earth's orbital intersection point. The timing was engineered, and the rhythmic venting pulses our observatories recorded are the direct mechanical output of automated release valves discharging pressurized cryogenic propellants from an ancient internal stabilization matrix. This is an interstellar machine completing the final sequence of a journey that began in a corner of the galaxy we have never seen. The single most damaging piece of evidence supporting that conclusion came from the spectroscopic instruments at the European Southern Observatory, data that the mainstream scientific establishment has quietly refused to release to the public. Standard cometary material produces well-understood spectral signatures, dominated by water ice, traces of carbon monoxide, and simple methane chains. The spectral lines recorded from the inner core of 3I Atlas reflect none of that familiar chemistry. What the infrared spectrographs captured was a massive concentration of heavy isotopes and complex metallic matrix composites entirely foreign to the chemical environment of our solar nebula. Specifically, the data confirmed a nickel-chromium-titanium abundance ratio that precisely matches the composition of industrial-grade aerospace superalloys. These are materials engineered by advanced manufacturing processes specifically for extreme high-temperature stress resistance and electromagnetic shielding. This is not exotic space dust, but a metallurgical architecture sitting inside a disguise of ancient ice waiting to be seen. The public explanation offered for these impossible spectral readings follows a familiar pattern. Official spokespersons describe the chemical anomalies as the product of an exotic, carbonaceous chondrite meteorite that evolved under unusual conditions inside a distant nebula. It is a convenient explanation because it is technically unprovable without direct sample collection, which is not happening. What it accomplishes is the preservation of a comfortable public narrative at the cost of an honest scientific conversation, a trade-off that is entirely intentional. Consider for a moment what would happen if a government science body stood in front of a global audience and stated plainly that an engineered titanium structure was currently scanning Earth's communication architecture while accelerating away from our planet at 58 kilometers per second. Financial markets would not absorb that information calmly, and social infrastructure built on centuries of assumed cosmic isolation would not adapt overnight. The controlled management of this telemetry data is a calculated institutional decision made by people who understand that certain categories of truth carry a destabilization cost their systems are not built to absorb. So, the raw spectrographic data gets filed, anomalous light curve readings get reclassified, and the public receives a reassuring summary that confirms what it already wants to believe, that the universe is vast, empty, and indifferent. Indifference, however, does not produce metronomic pulse sequences, nor does it engineer a sacrificial heat shield timed to dissolve at a specific planetary coordinate. Indifference certainly does not explain the next layer of evidence that satellite tracking networks have been quietly working to rationalize away: microthrust adjustments. On multiple occasions during its transit through our local orbital neighborhood, 3I Atlas made small but unmistakable course corrections that fall completely outside the passive physics of gravitational drift. Objects in space that are not under active propulsion follow predictable paths governed entirely by the gravitational influence of nearby masses. They do not make subtle lateral adjustments, nor do they fine-tune their approach vector. Yet, the tracking data shows a sequence of localized momentum corrections that carry the mathematical signature of an onboard guidance system making real-time navigational decisions. The entity was navigating our solar system, transforming the entire framing of what 3i Atlas actually represents. This is a functional, long-range mechanism executing a mission profile programmed before our sun had completed its first rotation. The mission profile did not involve stopping or making contact in any language we would recognize. It involved arriving at a precise coordinate, activating sensor systems during closest approach, harvesting whatever data was accessible within that window, and then continuing outward toward the edge of our solar system and back into the dark. Our planet was a checkpoint, a data collection node on a route that stretches across a galactic grid so old and vast that our entire recorded history occupies a fraction of its operational timeline. The archives that 3i Atlas assembled during its closest approach are already being compressed and transmitted outward toward a stellar coordinate no human telescope has yet cataloged. This fixed point in the deep galactic dark represents a relay rather than an origin. We are not the center of this story, but a footnote in someone else's navigational log, and the window to observe that reality is closing rapidly. Within the coming months, the luminous coma surrounding 3i Atlas will fade entirely from even the most powerful optical telescopes on Earth. Anomalous thermal signatures will dissipate into the freezing dark between stars, and the ancient titanium core will pass beyond Neptune's orbital threshold to vanish into a region of space our instruments cannot follow. When that happens, institutional machinery will quietly archive the raw data into classified repositories, allowing the public narrative to settle back into total cosmic isolation. Physics cannot be reclassified. The light curve calculations that revealed those 3-millisecond pulse intervals are permanently embedded in the tracking databases of every observatory that captured them. The spectral readings confirming a nickel-chromium-titanium abundance ratio inconsistent with naturally occurring space material cannot be wished away by a press release. The microthrust correction vectors recorded by satellite arrays represent a mathematical signature that no institutional statement can retroactively explain. The evidence is locked inside the servers, and equations do not negotiate with public relations departments. That permanence matters enormously because of what happened during 3i Atlas's close encounter with Jupiter. The extreme tidal stress generated during that historic gravitational interaction did not do what standard cometary mechanics predicted. A primitive ice body subjected to Jupiter's gravitational shearing forces should have fragmented catastrophically, scattering into a debris cloud across a wide orbital arc, much like comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 did. Instead of shattering, the gravitational forces peeled back the weathered exterior crust cleanly, exposing an engineered internal structure that had remained perfectly sealed since the object's ejection from a stellar system that no longer exists. What that exposed interior revealed immediately complicated every existing classification framework. The newly uncovered core began venting an unprecedented volume of deuterium-saturated heavy water at a distance from the sun where all natural liquids should exist in a state of absolute frozen suspension. Deuterium-enriched water freezes at a slightly different temperature, interacts differently with radiation, and its presence in such high quantities points to a formation environment fundamentally incompatible with our solar system's chemistry. When tracking data is used to trace the object's orbital journey backward through local galactic space, the trajectory resolves to a cold stellar nursery that predates our sun by a significant margin. The deuterium-to-hydrogen ratio recorded in the venting plume is 30 times higher than anything measurable in Earth's oceans. That is an architectural fingerprint, a chemical signature that can only be produced within the permanent deep freeze of an alien stellar environment where heavy water molecules crystallize during the earliest phases of star formation. This object was forged by a completely different cosmic chemistry set under conditions our planetary models were never designed to account for. The implications for biology make this anxiety difficult to contain. If a living system originated within that kind of deuterium-rich environment, Its metabolic architecture would operate on a completely different biochemical clock. Its proteins, cellular membranes, and reproductive chemistry would all be built around heavy water interactions rather than standard hydrogen-oxygen dynamics. Our planetary defense infrastructure has no protocol for that scenario. It was designed to track inert space rocks, not to contain the implications of a thermodynamic-defying sentinel actively accelerating toward our sector on a trajectory locked in from millions of years of galactic travel. The anxiety deepens further when you examine the specific mechanical behavior of the jets emanating from the exposed core with the level of precision the infrared detection arrays captured. Natural comets generate diffuse plumes because ice sublimation occurs across random surface depressions at irregular rates. This produces wide, unfocused clouds of gas and dust that scatter in every direction, serving as one of the most reliable identifying features of natural outgassing. 3I Atlas produces something structurally different. The jets originate from precisely engineered, nozzle-like apertures through which material emerges in controlled directional streams with consistent geometry. The anti-tail maintains its shape through continuous active emission rather than the sporadic, intermittent bursts expected from a rotating body of sublimating ice. It is a directed, continuous output that maintains its structural geometry across extended observation windows in a way that passive physics cannot sustain. The spectroscopic breakdown of that jet material reveals that the chemical composition is primarily nitrogen and water vapor, a combination consistent with cryogenic propellant systems being vented in a controlled manner. Cryogenic propulsion belongs in engineering documents and design specifications for spacecraft built for interstellar travel. Yet there it is, written clearly in spectral data from an object institutional science insists is nothing more than an exotic chunk of primordial ice. The forensic inquiry reaches its most structurally dangerous conclusion when examining the gravitational resonance keyhole. According to the tracking matrix, the rhythmic hexadecimal structured pulses recorded from the object's core are synchronized with a specific spatial coordinate in our upper atmospheric boundary. This invisible corridor, measuring only a few hundred meters across, is known as a gravitational resonance keyhole. If the kinetic orbital alignment of any future incoming object interfaces with this precise coordinate during its approach window, Earth's own gravitational pull would permanently bend that object's trajectory into a terminal countdown. This would lock it into a synchronized resonance pattern that guarantees an eventual surface strike during a subsequent pass. Official monitoring networks consistently fail to answer how they can claim absolute trajectory certainty while the fundamental variables governing non-gravitational forces remain entirely unmeasured. Specifically, the Yarkovsky effect, the gradual trajectory nudge produced by uneven thermal energy absorption and re-radiation across a hull, is ignored. The Yarkovsky effect is not a minor calculation footnote. Over multi-decade timelines, it compounds into trajectory deviations large enough to shift an object from a safe pass into a keyhole intersection. For an object with this metallurgical composition, the effect operates at scales that standard rocky asteroid models dramatically underestimate. Institutional declarations assuring the public that the probability of a catastrophic keyhole intersection has been reduced to absolute zero are not produced by complete data. They are produced by approximations within a monitoring system designed for known space rocks following predictable paths, not for engineered interstellar mechanisms executing active trajectory corrections. The gap between what official models can measure and what the full physical reality demands is a foundational blind spot in our planetary defense architecture. Global leadership has every structural incentive to keep that blind spot invisible to the people living beneath it. Think carefully about the long-term psychological weight of this position. Even if tracking arrays confirm that 3I Atlas has cleared the primary resonance keyhole during this pass, nothing about that outcome eliminates the underlying structural vulnerability. The object will continue moving, the keyhole will continue to exist, and every future interstellar object crossing our solar neighborhood will arrive, carrying the same potential for orbital capture. A near miss is not a solution. It is a postponement, and postponements accumulate into dangerous statistics rather than safety. The cosmic void is not the silent, empty desert that 4 centuries of reassuring astronomical tradition have trained the public to imagine. It is a crowded, ancient highway populated by fragments of dead stellar systems, engineered long-range mechanisms, and objects carrying the chemical signatures of formation environments our solar system has never replicated. These entities cross our path without announcement. They do not broadcast on frequencies we have been listening to, nor do they slow down to introduce themselves in languages we have developed. They execute their trajectories, complete their mission parameters, and continue outward into the dark, leaving behind nothing but fading light curves and spectral anomalies that get quietly reclassified before the public has a chance to ask the right questions. Somewhere in the unlit depths of the outer solar system right now, another mass of dark iron or engineered titanium is already tracing an approach vector that no terrestrial telescope has cataloged. The detection networks are not omniscient. They are reactive systems built on historical assumptions about what space objects look like and how they behave. These are assumptions that 3i Atlas has methodically invalidated across every observable parameter. From its hyperbolic trajectory and metronomic pulse emissions to its metallurgical core composition, active microthrust corrections, and directed cryogenic propellant venting, every single characteristic that should have flagged this object as fundamentally different was either misclassified, delayed in publication, or quietly absorbed into a classified repository before it could generate public conversation. We are standing on the edge of a new reality where the stories we have been told about our place in the universe no longer match the data appearing on our instruments. The evidence is already in the archives, the telemetry is recorded, and the implications are far too massive to ignore. If you want to stay ahead of the truths being hidden in the deep space data and ensure you never miss a breakdown of what is really happening beyond our atmosphere, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with anyone ready to look past the official narrative.